Welcome, everybody, to the Old Time Boxing Show on the Gruely True Sports Network. The Old Time Boxing Show is brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation. Make sure you check them out on Facebook with Jackie Richardson and Alex Ramos. I'm your host for the Old Time Boxing Show, Mike Goodpaster, and my co-host is the Gruely Truth boxing historian, has been a boxing historian for many different places. It has been a while since we've done this, Chris, but I want to welcome in Christopher Shelton. How you doing, Chris?
Good, Mike. It's fun to get to do it again and go over history again and see if it's the same way people remember it or if we're seeing something different.
Well, and the good thing is there are no heavyweights worth a shit anymore, so we'll go ahead and look back at some guys that were pretty good, because the thing that struck me as our topic today is Gerry Cooney, and I watched this fight against Ken Norton. He ended that fight with basically a 16-punch combination, which I don't know if the heavyweights today throw 16 punches that land in an entire fight.
Yeah, that was really crazy, and I felt bad for Norton because somehow his positioning caught him in the ropes in a way that he couldn't fall down, and he couldn't defend himself. And I'm sure the referee, if he could watch it on video, and it happened so fast, would have tried to stop it, before so many punches, especially knowing Norton became paralyzed and all sorts of things. That Cooney's just pummeling with punch after punch after punch to the head, and Norton is incapable of falling down or defending himself. He's taking a really awful beating for less than a minute.
Yeah, and I think our next show we're going to do a topic which is Michael Spinks, which is a guy that I think people tend to remember his last fight, not everything else before it. And I think with Cooney, a lot of people just remember he was a white heavyweight, but this is a guy who had tremendous boxing skill, especially if you compare him to the fighters of today. And he won multiple New York State Golden Gloves championships, Chris.
Yeah, he was a great amateur fighter, and it's hard for me to get to see those bouts. I wasn't sure so much about his pro career as far as a boxer. He had a terrific left hook. If he jabbed, aimed at the body and threw body punches sort of consistently, they certainly landed. He's a hard hitter. Sometimes I'm not sure the way they set him up gave him enough sort of Jimmy Young type people to prepare him for what we'll talk about, Larry Holmes and someone like that. I'm not sure he's quite ready to face a real boxer. Though he's a big guy, and if he faces another big guy, he could probably club him and beat him up.
Yeah, and he grew up in a blue-collar Irish Catholic family on Long Island. The thing that stood out to me is I've had the opportunity to talk to him a few times, and number one, he's a great guy, and number two, something he said to me that really stuck with me. I don't think he said this on the show I did with him, but he told me off air that the hardest he ever got hit was by his dad.
Yeah, that's very, very sad. In fact, my girlfriend, Colleen, is Irish, suffers through my watching all these bouts and stuff like that, and didn't really like him as a boxer. But when she heard her interview with you, she was just deeply touched by, the Gerry Cooney one. He was, live in this, prize heavyweight. He goes, what a great family we have. What a great, we're all about family. And then in real life, and he tells his story, which you did a great job. He's abused, and he hates his dad. His dad treats him, I took a lot of beatings too, but that's all you know. It's a trust factor, and he's just beating the shit out of you. He's got an older brother that's a boxer. Probably he's getting, beaten too, and it's just an awful situation when you're a victim of child abuse.
Yeah, and at the end of his amateur career, he was 55-3. He was trained by a guy by the name of Johnny Capobianco. Wonder if he was Italian. But before he signed, he signed with co-manager Mike Jones and Dennis Rappaport. He was trained by Victor Valley. Now, Jones and Rappaport were guys that were nicknamed the Wacko Twins. And I think as we look through their career, that it's very understandable why they were called that. So when Cooney starts his career out, and I think the complete intention of the Wacko Twins was basically to make money off the collar of Gerry Cooney's skin. And in his first, he didn't fight a fighter with a winning record until like his 11th pro fight. And the thing that stood out to me about that fight was also it was the first time he was on national television. And he fought on CBS, and he fought S.T. Gordon. And S.T. Gordon was a guy that, at the time, it seemed like no big deal. But S.T. Gordon went on to win the Cruiserweight Championship of the World. I think he upset Carlos De Leon.
Yeah, they're both Irish, and you're right. Cooney, Cooney record looked impressive, especially after the first 10 fights, 10-0, 9 knockouts. But yes, what would follow Cooney really throughout his career is really fighting quality opponents. And unless S.T. Gordon is a better fighter, and for Cooney, it appears to be a quality win, but gosh, the announcers really just beat up on S.T. Gordon. Said he's probably good at a lot of things, but not boxing. That doesn't say a lot of what people thought about his performance. But Cooney has something to do with that bad performance. You know, you're facing people you're not getting used to getting hit by Cooney, which people like Foreman, people who fought a lot of guys. Said, this guy hits you. It's different than a lot of other fighters. Maybe S.T. Gordon who's avoiding him and, trying to box, was doing smart, but, Cooney caught him. And Cooney wasn't always very good at blocking the ring, trying to cut it off. He wasn't very good at cutting off the ring, but eventually he caught Gordon when he started hitting Gordon. Gordon was taking some hits he wasn't used to, and it turned into disqualification 4 rounds for Gerry Cooney.
Yeah, and the thing that stood out to me about that was the bout never should have been sanctioned by the Nevada Athletic Commission. Cooney was a 220-pound heavyweight. Gordon weighed in for the fight at 187, which is a cruiserweight, and I think that's what caused. Plus, he wasn't a very experienced fighter. I think S.T. Gordon, I don't even know if he had an amateur career, but that S.T. Gordon was nothing like the S.T. Gordon that would go on a handful of years later to beat guys like Sugar De Leon, Jesse Burnett, and S.T. Gordon beat Trevor Berbick even.
Yeah, well, obviously that Gordon's proven some sort of a record, but fighting against Cooney, he really just kind of ran around. It was called the bicycle syndrome, and he did as a dull fight because he wasn't engaging in any way. I guess you could call it defensive boxing, but it's not looking good.
No, he was trying to keep him dying.
He's trying to keep him dying, exactly. And Cooney's having trouble cutting off the ring, so it's just a matter of when he lands a left hook, and he sort of looks like he's just sort of outstretching his arm a little bit, so he's sort of vaguely connecting with him, but not really getting the force and momentum until, I guess it's not that far in the early round, but it almost seems like a longer fight than it was because it was hard to get anything to happen. Cooney couldn't quite hit the guy, and the guy didn't want to throw punches. He just wanted to run.
Yeah, and then Cooney goes back to beating guys with losing records, and then he fights a guy by the name of Eddie the Animal Lopez. And Eddie the Animal Lopez went the distance with Gerry Cooney, and the thing I remember about Eddie the Animal Lopez, he was one of the toughest guys, and he could take a shot. He beat S.T. Gordon around the same time, but he also fought Big John Tate, who was the Olympic silver medalist in 1976, and he lost a majority decision.
Some people think a heavyweight champion, some people don't, but I know what you mean. Go out. Sorry.
Yeah, he wasn't the heavyweight champion. Larry Holmes was the heavyweight champion then. But John Tate won a majority decision. I remember watching that fight. I thought Eddie Lopez beat him, and Lopez would go on in his career. He fought some decent competition. He lost a split decision to Leon Spinks, which I thought he won. He got TKO'd by Marty Monroe. Remember this name, Nick Wells. Actually, I think he was the last man to fight Nick Wells in 1982. But Eddie the Animal Lopez, up until this point, I think was the toughest competition that Cooney had fought. And he actually went the distance with Cooney, which I remember from reading like Boxing Illustrated. People wanted to know if maybe Cooney couldn't hit that hard. But I think in retrospect, Lopez's ability to take punishment was damn near second to none coming into that fight.
Right, and also that Cooney's fights were usually shortened fights as far as people think of now, 12-round fights or 12 rounds or 15 rounds. You got an 8-round bout. So Cooney usually set himself scheduled for most of the ones I watched for about 10 rounds. And Yeah, Lopez. Lopez was a good opponent for Cooney because I still think there's something in the way that there was greed amongst Cooney's people of, hey, we've got ourselves a prize, which became a more valuable prize, and that maybe we should just concentrate on the money and the value of Cooney monetarily, as opposed to really putting up against quality opponents, but opponents that Cooney can beat, like Lopez, and really build his skills just a little bit better before he absolutely goes for the big prize.
Well, see, and I would compare it to Mike Tyson fighting James Quick Tillis, if you know what I'm saying. Where James Quick Tillis was a
Oh
tough
yeah,
guy with a ton of experience, and even though Mike Tyson didn't knock him out, the advantages to fighting a guy like Quick Tillis and going 10 rounds is a lot better than fighting 54 seconds and knocking out Marvis Frazier.
right. And I give Tyson credit. As the first person to go the distance with Mike Tyson as a professional, and it shows. I grew not to like Tyson so much later on, but that he knew this guy probably was going to go the distance, even though he knocked Tillis flat at least a couple times. And I think he said somewhere around the 8th round in a 10-round bout, he decided that that's okay. Tillis can go the distance, and I'm simply going to keep boxing and be smart and not do something stupid going for the knockout. And, it was good for Tyson to learn something to go the distance because, eventually that's what happens when you move up the ranks. And so it's difficult of trying to put up a quality fighter who your fighter's going to beat. So you go on a fighter against Gerry Cooney that Cooney's going to beat, but he's going to learn something from the fight. And Tillis was a good one for Tyson, and Lopez was a good one for Cooney.
Yeah, the only problem is they didn't give Cooney two more of those guys before 3 years later came.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
fight that put Cooney into the top 10, I think, was a fight at Madison Square Garden, which was on HBO. I forget who it was the undercard for, but Gerry Cooney knocked out the veteran John Dino Dennis in 1 minute and 14 seconds of the third round. And I think that's the fight where people really started to pay attention to Cooney because Dennis was known as a tough guy who'd fought just about everybody going into that fight.
Right. Yeah, he's an experienced fighter with a good record. It was a quality fight for Cooney. Dennis, fought George Foreman and such, so he knows how to take a punch, and he knows how to avoid a punch. So it was a quality win for Cooney. I think it was a third round knockout, but he may have been better off if Dennis hung around, I don't know, 5 or 6 rounds, and just again get some sort of a boxing lesson because Dennis could box, but Cooney did. Once Cooney hit him and started beating on him, Dennis was finished, and that was impressive. It's very impressive to knock out and defeat somebody like Dennis in 3 rounds at Madison Square Garden, so high profile. But again, Cooney wasn't gaining much other than a high-profile win. When it turns out in retrospect, it might have been better if it had gone 5, 6 rounds or something like that. But it was very impressive for Cooney to take out somebody of high quality in such a short amount of time.
Well, then he stops Leroy Boone, who was a decent fighter. I think he stopped him in the 6th round, and I think it was a convention center in Atlantic City. But
He gave Cooney a good fight.
yeah, I mean, Leroy Boone actually put up a fight against him, so that was a good one for him. And then he fights Jimmy Young. And the thing about Jimmy Young is, it's according when you fight Jimmy Young. And the thing that always struck me was the fact that Jimmy Young, I think, was in about as good a shape as I've seen him for this Cooney fight. I think he took it extremely seriously. And Cooney opened up a huge gash on him. And I always wanted to see what would have happened and how much more Cooney could have learned by this fight going more than 4 rounds. But this was a fight on CBS Sports, or CBS, and it was on a Saturday afternoon, if I remember right. I actually remember watching this fight. And I think this is the fight that really threw Cooney into the fire here of getting him that Holmes fight.
Right, and Jimmy Young, I'm not sure if all listeners exactly know, was a great defensive fighter. He started out a little more apparently sort of almost mediocre, somebody you didn't think was going to go too far, and then he just started becoming such a great defensive fighter and quick and fast and smart that he was putting together a series of wins. Fought Muhammad Ali's champion for the heavyweight championship. I think he gave him a hell of a fight. I actually think he won the fight. I know you don't think he did, but
I don't think either one of them deserved to win that fight, to tell you the truth.
Right. Like if it was a football game, if any game could end in a 0-0 tie, that was the one. I thought Young was impressive, but I know he started falling through the ropes with a sort of tactic so that it wouldn't be a knockdown and that there'd be a delay. That was sort of ugly for Young because he was really defeating Ali in a way that you'd be rooting for him. But when he did sort of rope a smoke or whatever he's doing, it was kind of ugly. And then he fought George Foreman, knocked Foreman down. I think Foreman's last knockdown in the 15th round, and just brilliant in giving Foreman his second loss. And
he beat Foreman.
10 years. And exactly, great victory. Fought Norton, real close fight. I guess anybody could watch Ken Norton and Jim Young come to their own conclusion, but ultimately Ken Norton got the decision.
Yeah, that was a hell of a fight too, because Norton's known for being boring, but Norton Young was a great fight. And then we got to the point where we talked about before, where he loses the 2 fights to Ozzy Ocasio, where he's overweight and just seems disinterested.
Yeah, exactly. But when he fought Cooney, Young, you're right. Young knew this is it. This is it. This is the guy. Cooney is such a high profile. Muhammad Ali wanted to fight him earlier, and a lot of the guys wanted to fight Gerry Cooney, especially because Gerry Cooney had this white label on him and the Great White Hope. And Jimmy Young was a very high profile bout, and he came in prepared, and it looked like in the first, seemingly only a round or two, but it looked like he was going to give Cooney a lot to think about as far as being able to dodge the punches, deflect them a little bit, move inside, keep Cooney from establishing distance. But in the end, Cooney caught him fast and beat him up, hit that eye and cut it open, and then really started smashing on it. And the left hook lands, and Jimmy Young was finished. They 4 rounds, and they maybe should have stopped it a little bit earlier. Cooney was almost doing too good when he was fighting some of these guys, and Jimmy Young was one of them. That, gosh, if it had gone 6-7 rounds, it might have helped Cooney. I'm not sure, but how can you blame a guy if you can knock a guy out in 4 rounds? Knock him out in 4 rounds. Don't play games with somebody like Jimmy Young. And he didn't, and beat the shit out of him.
Now, here's my only thing with the retrospective of Gerry Cooney is the way people write off the Ron Lyle and the Ken Norton wins. But when you look at this, Ron Lyle, the 2 years before he fought Cooney, had beaten Stan Ward, who was a contender, Joe Bugner, who was a contender. He beat Scott Ledoux. He did have a loss to Lynn Ball. But going into that fight, he was a fringe top 10 guy. So I don't think this was him as far over the hill as people thought it was. I do think he was over the hill, but I still think the beat him in 2 minutes is pretty impressive.
I think so, too, because they always say in boxing, the last thing to go is your punch. And Ron Lyle can punch. He and George Foreman probably got in the best slug-it-out battle, maybe an offensive boxing fight in history, knocking each other down several times. And so Ron Lyle, he came out too. Cooney, these were not being handed to him. Ron Lyle came out on fire. He attacked Cooney, again, a high profile. Ron Lyle, sort of like Jimmy Young, he sort of looked like, this is my opportunity, my last opportunity maybe, and that Cooney turned around quick. I mean, it's very impressive to take out somebody like Ron Lyle in a strict slugging contest where really Cooney just beat the shit out of Ron Lyle. And Ron Lyle was a tough guy, a lot of years in jail for murder, manslaughter, I think, and gave Muhammad Ali a pretty damn good fight for the heavyweight championship, and Cooney beat the shit out of him. It's impressive, and I guess that's all I can say.
Yeah, and I know he wasn't in his prime. It's not the same as beating up Ron Lyle in 1976.
30 years old, yeah.
But I don't think it should be written off as quickly as people do. And the other one is Ken Norton, which that was on HBO. And I still remember every fight that was on that card because that card started with Marvis Frazier against Steve Zalski and Domingo D. Elia, who upset Miguel Montillo. And in the main event, Cooney in 54 seconds absolutely destroys Ken Norton. But the thing about Norton is this, once again, after the loss to Shavers by a first-round knockout in March of 79, he comes back 5 months later. He gets a draw with Scott Ledoux, who was a top 10 guy there. He would get a shot against, Larry Holmes a few months, about a year after that. And then he fought Randall Tex Cobb about 6 months before he fought Cooney. He beat Cobb on a controversial split decision. So once again, people want to act like he's 57 years old, But still, this is a Ken Norton who was ranked sixth, I think, by the WBA and 10th by the WBC.
Yeah, serious, disciplined, well-conditioned athlete, even against his aging, ex-Marine, gave Muhammad Ali a second loss.
And he was a decent actor in Mandingo.
Yeah, there you go. You can't beat that. But Gerry Cooney, I guess sometimes I almost want to think, that he's overhyped or knock his boxing skills. But maybe one thing that's underestimated is his pure power. This is a guy facing sluggers and really beating the crap out of him. And the Norton thing is just so unfortunate because Norton got pinned against the ropes and couldn't escape. And Cooney's just pounding on him. And you think years later where Ken Norton's in a wheelchair and the punishment box he takes out on somebody. But, Cooney has to keep throwing punches until the referee stops it. And the referee probably could have stopped it about, 10, 15 seconds earlier. And it would have been great for Ken Norton's health, but he didn't. So Cooney didn't have any choice but to keep pounding on the guy. And Norton was unconscious. He didn't even know where he was. He was out. He was that was a really brutal knockout by Gerry Cooney.
All right, and then we get to the end of 81, 1982. And the thing that I always wondered was the fight was made for CBS Sports with Gerry Cooney versus Mike Weaver. I think the fight was made for like October of 81. And
right.
I think Cooney got hurt or Weaver got hurt. They ended up not fighting. And I always wondered, because I think Cooney would have beat Weaver because I think he had more skill and they were both big punchers. My big thing here is I wonder how that would have changed things.
I think it would have been, in retrospect, it depends on what you're trying to do. Just make money or get the glory of the championship, I assume.
I'm talking about the experience of fighting a guy like Mike Weaver who went life or death against Larry Holmes.
That's exactly what I'm saying, too, and agreeing that Mike Weaver, one of the greatest fights I ever remember was against John Tate. He was down after 14 rounds. He was going to lose the fight, and that 15th round, out of nowhere, knockout of Tate. I love Mike Weaver. Mike Weaver was a guy who could land a punch and sometimes couldn't take a punch, but he was dangerous, and I do think Cooney should face somebody that real dangerous before fighting Holmes, and I do agree that I think it would be an interesting fight. And I do think Cooney would probably, maybe going in, I would think he might have an advantage because it seemed like he could take a punch maybe better than Mike Weaver, but both of them could deliver a punch, and Mike Weaver is a better, more experienced fighter. And I wish Cooney had fought Weaver if his goal is to become champion. It didn't happen. Cooney seemed very disappointed by his handlers because it doesn't seem like he was really given a reason. And he's the fighter, and it seems like, well, you ask him, why didn't you fight Mike Weaver? I don't know. And it seems like there's just a bunch of politics, and he's put in the hands of people that he trusts, and, his background with his dad. And I feel bad for Cooney because you probably go through life thinking everybody sucks. You can't trust anyone. I think he would have been better off fighting Weaver. He didn't, and it's too bad. It would have been a very interesting fight, and I think it would have been better for Cooney's career, certainly if he could beat him.
Yeah, because I think really if you push Cooney Holmes back a year or even, it could change the outcome of the fight. Then one of my favorites was it the Leon Spinks, Larry Holmes title fight, where at the end of the fight, Cooney and Holmes go after each other while Howard Cosell's interviewing him and knocks off Howard Cosell's toupee.
Oh, yeah. And what was really crazy, I still remember the Spinks Holmes fight. Spinks was the third person to meet Muhammad Ali when the title is that it was a joke in the pre-fight that Spinks, people were predicting this guy to possibly beat Larry Holmes, and that seems so absurd in retrospect.
Yeah, but you know what that was. Spinks beat Ali, and everybody was still holding on to Ali instead of Holmes.
Right. That was something that Holmes had a bitterness to him, and I've got to say that bitterness is ugly. Rocky Marciano couldn't hold my jockstrap type comments, and screw what people think of me. I don't want my family thinks of me. He put himself out bad, but that bitterness was there, and I think you're right. It was waiting to come out. Even Howard Cosell knocked his toupee off.
Well, how about this though? Because I've gotten to talk to Larry Holmes multiple times. Did a show, interviewed him there, and I think the bitterness actually drove him. I think the bitterness is what made him a great fighter because I think he liked thinking the whole world was against him, and I think that he enjoyed people wanting to see him lose, and he just kept winning, and it was more of like a me against the world thing with Larry Holmes. And Larry Holmes, I can tell you, the first time I talked to him before I interviewed him, I come off thinking, oh man, this interview is going to be terrible because the guy's an asshole.
Right.
But then when you interview him and you talk to him after that, once he has some modicum of respect for you, it's like he stays in this shell because of the way people have treated him before, and he's trying to feel you out to see if you're one of these people looking for an angle to attack him or not, if that makes any sense. And then once he realizes that you're not, he's a damn good guy.
Yeah, and I gather some of the things. What I'm usually getting is just what I hear at press conference and stuff, not realizing that a person can be their worst self or their best self, but not their real self, either way. And, you've interviewed him personally, but I got to see, sort of other forums for him. And like I love my girlfriend, Colleen. It's really nice to hear him talk about a love for his wife. And he loves, his town in Pennsylvania. And he's built a good business. And there is a side of Larry Holmes that feels like if everybody wasn't against me, I'd be a nicer guy. But everybody is against me. I'm not Muhammad Ali. And then the Gerry Cooney thing really spun him into everybody's against me now because I'm a black or the wrong this and the this and that. And it made him cuckoo a little bit. And at the same time, you're right, it drove him to be a really legitimate heavyweight champion. Not John Tate, but Larry Holmes.
Yeah, and the thing is, that fight was originally scheduled for March of 1982. It was postponed because Cooney injured his back in training, was pushed to June. And I think this, in my lifetime, which is 1968 to now, I remember stuff probably from 75 on. I still think out of all the fights I've ever seen, this was the biggest fight in my lifetime. This was one of the biggest sporting events in the history of sports.
Oh, it certainly was. And it was just sort of sad it became so racially oriented, the white guy and the black guy and the Great White Hope stuff, because, and some people were saying, yeah, but white people can root for the white guy, and that doesn't make them racist. You're any more than a black guy can root for Larry Holmes, and that doesn't make them racist. But that's what it became, and I feel bad for Larry Holmes because there are people that for whatever reason, I can think of myself and my girlfriend for different reasons, that you get labeled white. When you get labeled white in a non-white world, or in a non, it makes you look like a horrible person or a racist, even though Gerry Cooney really didn't have anything to do with that.
No. This was all, it didn't have anything to do with Cooney or Holmes. It was basically, as they called them, the Wacko twins and Don King, which decided they were going to make as much money as they could. But when you look at it, Johnson and Jeffries had the same racial connotations. Lewis and Schmeling, they used the Nazi versus the American. Ali Frazier was a black-white fight because you had so many black people.
Crazy.
Yeah, black people
Uncle
labeling
Tom against the real black guy.
Yeah, Uncle Tom against a real black guy. So this is the thing. To this day, Deontay Wilder just fought Luis Ortiz, and in less than 200,000 people bought the pay-per-view. My question to you is this: at $80 a pop, if Holmes and Cooney were fighting today, how many people would buy that fight? Because my guess is you're looking at 5 to 10 million at least.
It would be out of sight if you have no idea what's going to happen in the fight because besides the racial anything, and just to mention, Newsweek put Sylvester Stallone, the fictional boxer, and Gerry.
Oh, that was Time Magazine.
Oh, it's Time Magazine. So
yeah.
It did come across awkward, but beyond it, you have a great boxer against a slugger, and slugger versus boxer styles make fights. The Irishman. Cooney's, background, it just led to a fight. And Cooney's devastation of Norton, Young, Dennis, Lyle, it just looked like a great, it was waiting to happen. And finally with Larry Holmes, there was a certain feeling, even though it probably isn't fair exactly, that he's not really taking on the same kind of guys as Muhammad Ali. I'm not sure it's his fault. I think he should have fought George Foreman. But meanwhile, this time it was high profile. Larry Holmes is in the spotlight. There's no more Muhammad Ali. He got the only knockout of Muhammad Ali in the 10th round when Ali wisely scanned Dundee wouldn't let him go off to the 11th. But Holmes was finally, I'm the goddamn heavyweight champion, and I don't think he's gonna show him Gerry Cooney a lesson. I just think he thought I'm gonna fight really smart, and it's gonna work for me. And he did. It was an interesting, really well boxed, thought out fight by Larry Holmes.
Yeah, and this is one where you have all kind of depth threats. They got snipers positioned on top of the buildings. The white guy, the white Irishman, Gerry Cooney, comes out to the theme from Rocky. McFadden and Whitehead are playing Ain't No Stopping Us Now for Larry Holmes. They get in the ring, right. And then the final shot, which to me, the final shot to me is this. They introduced Larry Holmes, the world heavyweight champion, first. And the thing why that really stands out to me is Don King's one of the promoters of this fight. Don King knew they were going to do that.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. Gosh, I'm supposed to be the historian, but you might have me on this one since you've spoken about Holmes and Cooney. But I always found it interesting because generally the heavyweight champion has a choice. Now, Jack Johnson, as heavyweight champion, chose to go first. He wanted to go first. It was a choice. Almost every other champion chooses to go second. I just sort of assumed Holmes was given an option and chose first, but I don't know.
He wasn't. He wasn't given an option because I remember talking to him, and he said it was the thing that pissed him off the most was when they introduced him first because he assumed he would be the second guy introduced.
You're right. He assumed to give the choice, and now I know, and he's right. He has a goddamn right to be pissed off. That's wrong. The heavyweight champion gets a choice. Most go second, but if you want to go first, it's a choice, and then he can give him a choice. That sucks. Larry Holmes has a right to be pissed off and feel degraded as a heavyweight champion or as an athlete or as a human being.
Yeah, and the fight is one that stood out to me. Like you said, Holmes, I think, really respected Cooney's power even before he felt it because Holmes fought very tight. And I don't mean tight where he was nervous, but I mean both hands were up the whole time, where against a guy like a Lorenzo Zanone, he may let the right drop here or there, the left drop here or there, but he stayed really tight. And at the end of the second round, he caught Cooney, and he put Cooney on the ground. And I remember watching this fight with my dad and a bunch of his friends, and our immediate thing was, this is just a guy that's there because he's white. But after that second round, Cooney pretty much controlled the third through the seventh rounds.
Well, he had everybody sort of determines how they see it. I do think Cooney fought much better and seemed to be not just confident but sort of smarter. Now this guy's in front of me, and what do I do with him? And Cooney was pressing the fight better, and in a sense, those are boxing skills. He could cut off the ring a little bit better than he had in the past. And Holmes was bouncing on his legs or standing flat-footed. He was giving Cooney a lot of different things, and Cooney was certainly, for the people that thought, hey, this guy can't box, this guy's fought nothing but chumps, this guy's undeserving, but he really is hanging in there with Holmes looking really at his best. I mean, Larry Holmes, sometimes could get sloppy and let himself get knocked down. He rarely lost too many rounds, but he didn't want Cooney to land that left hook. So he kept keeping that at bay as best he could, and trying to throw Cooney off, and it was a pretty close fight after 7 or 8 rounds. And some people think, I was with people. I was actually betting on Larry Holmes, so I was happy about it. But yeah, it was a close enough fight that Larry Holmes could never get sloppy. And I think he kept hoping Cooney would tire out, but Cooney was not tiring out. He never got anywhere near the amount of rounds he went for that fight.
Well, and the punch that stands out to me the most, and this is just from talking to Holmes, Holmes said the hardest body shot he ever got hit by was at the end of the 4th round against Gerry Cooney. And I remember him telling me, he said, when you go back and watch the fight, watch after that punch. The bell rings a few seconds after, and you'll see me headed back to my corner, and I grab on the ropes. He said it felt like his ribs were broke. And from there, I think the fight was relatively even through 8 rounds, and even through 10 possibly. And then Cooney's inactivity and not going more than 8 to 10 rounds before, I think, really bit him in the ass.
Oh, absolutely. And Holmes, which, it drove people crazy because there's sort of Holmes didn't really care what the fans thought in many ways. So these dull 15-round fights, but there were quite a few of them against really quality guys. So he was used to just picking up points, landing his combinations when he said that left jab that keeps hitting, and being smart against Cooney. He just figures, I'm not going to do something stupid against Cooney, and trying to find his moments, which he was getting them. I really thought Holmes, I thought in my mind was probably a little farther ahead than the judges, but it was still a close fight. It was a great fight after 10 rounds. I would have thought Holmes was a little more ahead, but a lot of people thought it was almost even, and that's not – in retrospect, it's a close fight, and I give Cooney a lot of credit, though some people think, hey, he really should have – he took away some of his aggression just practicing for duration, while Holmes was used to duration, and again, a more experienced guy, and he didn't really fight bitter. Holmes fought smart, and I like that. Bitters can really help you sometimes, but I really think Holmes just fought smart against Cooney.
Yeah, and the whole key to me why I think Cooney was a very talented guy, is because I think he got the best Larry Holmes possible, and he was very competitive against him.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love that, because that's Gerry Cooney, where you can give him a lot of credit. He made Larry Holmes finally look like Larry Holmes. He made Larry Holmes have to fight at his best and his smartest. And you got to give Cooney a lot of credit, because the training, especially after you're champion, you just let down against certain guys. And Cooney brought out Holmes' best, and it was still a hell of a fight. Holmes is best. And not bitter, finally was able to start landing the punches a little more frequent. He was you could see Cooney, the hand speed going down, a blurriness sort of in Cooney, and then Holmes just sort of waiting to attack, and just started coming to an end about the 12th, 13th round.
Yeah, and I have a problem with Jones and Rappaport and the way they handled Cooney. Victor Valley, who was his trainer, I don't have a problem with, though, because a lot of guys would allow that fight to continue. Because if you look at the last knockdown where Cooney grabs onto the ropes, kind of slowly goes to the ground, Mills Lane's giving him a count, and he's probably going to let that fight go. And Victor Valley ran in, puts his arms around Cooney, and it made me have a lot of respect for Victor Valley, even though the stuff that was said in between rounds in that ring from him and Dennis Rappaport, I thought were appalling. I think that with Valley, he was a guy that really cared about Cooney.
Well, I think that it is true. And I'll have very suddenly, when Holmes was clearly on the attack and knocking Cooney a little bit senseless, I'm not actually sure Cooney hit the ground before Mills Lane stopped it. I do believe Mills Lane stopped it before Cooney's corner stopped. It all happened almost in a flash, but they called it a knockdown, but Cooney hadn't actually touched the ground when Mills Lane jumped.
They did call it a knockdown, because he was starting to give him the 8 count, because he got wrapped up with his left arm in the ropes, and he reached down with his right glove. That's when Mills Lane called it a knockdown, and he was counting. Now, I don't know if Mills Lane would have let it go, but I'm just saying, at that time, it's not like these times. It's for the heavyweight championship of the world, and my guess is he probably lets him have a shot.
Yeah, you know what? I guess that's a good point, because once Valley comes into the ring, it's over. And he grabs grabs Cooney, hugs him. Basically, you did a hell of a job. I love you, but there's no reason to take this another 2 rounds. And Mills Lane did a great job officiating. I got to give the guy an credit, and it all happened again sort of in a blur. And I think it was for everybody concerned. I'm not sure it would have been a good idea for Cooney to go there for a 14th and 15th round against Holmes, who's so used to these 15-round fights, and maybe could have inflicted some serious damage on Cooney. We don't know for sure, but it seems if Cooney's camp feels that way, then I don't think it's unreasonable for other people to think that way.
All right, then Cooney, after that fight, took over 2 years off, went into depression, started drinking heavily. This is not my conjecture. This is what I was told, and by the source. And over 2 years, they don't get him back in the ring. And the way this should have ran was he's losing in June. He should have been fighting by October at the latest to get anybody just to get him out of that depression, to continue his career going, because I think letting this go over 2 years before he fought again was basically the end of Gerry Cooney.
Right. I do believe that, when you have a depression like this, Floyd Patterson would say when you lose a high-profile bout, you're one step closer to the ghetto. And Cooney went from star to bum, and the fall so harsh. And I gather he had problems with alcohol and problems with depression. And I guess you have to decide whether you're going to do it or not. But then at some point somebody starts pointing money at you. I don't think he really wanted to do it again, but people started pointing money. And what else is he going to do? You got bills to pay, and you're worth a lot of money. You're very high profile. And so, I guess you get back to the game.
Well, see, the sad thing also is, right after that fight in 1982, everybody had mad respect for Gerry Cooney. It's the going on the apology tour for a year, and in 2 years, 3 months later, he fights Philip Brown in Anchorage, Alaska. Brown was 23-0, but he was nondescript. He knocks him out. And then 3 months later, he fights George Chaplin. Now, George Chaplin's a guy that was a solid fighter, and he knocks him out. George Chaplin, I think, beat Greg Page by a decision, even though he gave Page the decision a few years before. And then you think, well, he's fought twice in 3 months. Everything's changed. But it didn't.
Well,
because,
yeah. Okay.
I mean, because you got another year and a half before he fights again against Eddie Gregg.
Yeah, and, again, they're pretty quick victories. The 4-rounder against in Anchorage against Brown, and then the 2-rounder in Phoenix, Arizona, my own Phoenix, Arizona. But the thing is, my girlfriend Colleen, who got really excited about these things, says she's really upset with Gerry Cooney because she swears he's on steroids. She's looking at his body versus Holmes and his body against Brown and Chaplin, and says, "Hey, this guy's not looking right. His back muscles look wrong. His physique looks different." And we all know a lot of people did steroids. And it says boobs. She's pointing at me. His boobs look different. And she's convinced he was on steroids. And I don't know whether it was or wasn't, but he does look a little bit different. And it's worthy of at least throwing it out there that maybe there's a lot of stuff going on in Cooney's head while he's getting at least a couple wins, staying a little bit in the limelight, though he wasn't ranked or anything. And he's still a high profile, popular guy, a popular guy without a cause, sort of.
Yeah, and I think with the steroids there, I think with the alcohol and the drugs, usually guys like that aren't doing steroids. When you get to 86, he fought Eddie Gregg. He stopped him in a round. Eddie Gregg was a decent fighter. He was 24-1. I think they fought that at the Cow Palace in San Francisco. Then you get a year off, and he gets a shot against Michael Spinks, who, of course, had upset Larry Holmes twice, had defended his title once against Stefan Tangstad, which is the only time we'll ever bring up Stefan Tangstad on a boxing show.
That is an embarrassment that it's a heavyweight championship fight. Some people say it isn't.
It is a heavyweight championship fight because Michael Spinks was the true heavyweight champion of the world. And you know what? Ali got to fight like Richard Dunn, which ain't a whole hell of a lot better. And all these guys, Joe Lewis, all these guys fought nondescript guys, Jean-Pierre Koopman, Brian London. All those guys were a joke, too, when it came to being actually qualified to fight for the heavyweight championship. But this Spinks and Cooney fight is a fight where I think Cooney, in his right mind, probably wins just on size alone. But Michael Spinks beat the hell out of him, basically.
Well, yeah, she fought a smart fight. Now, with the talk about steroids, now Cooney looks different against Spinks, but in a better way. He looks healthier. He doesn't look quite as deformed as he does in those other couple fights, especially that right after Holmes. And Michael Spinks, my girlfriend says, "There's no way that man's on steroids." And Michael Spinks, gold Olympic champion, one of the greatest light heavyweight champions ever. Unbelievable fight to take Larry Holmes' undefeated record, one of the great fights ever to win the championship. And yeah, he fought really smart against. He fought not just smart against Cooney, he fought aggressive. People thought Spinks was kind of run, stay at the distance, stay away from Cooney. It's his power, but Spinks just really seemed to try to bother Cooney's distance and then just use superior hand speed to keep landing punches until and footwork that very quickly Spinks turned around into knockdown and knockout. And it's just a reminder what a great fighter Michael Spinks is. I don't know if Cooney at that point was where he was at, and stuff like that. But Michael Spinks made him look back because Michael Spinks was just a great fighter. And, it's fun to watch all the celebrities there because Michael Spinks deserves his moment. And just a great fight, knockout, 5 rounds, TKO for the heavyweight champion, Mr. Spinks.
Just imagine if Gerry Cooney does this right, and in 1987 or 88, he's got one loss, but maybe won a rematch against Larry Holmes. What kind of money would Cooney Tyson do?
Wow! Oh, absolutely. If he, I guess you can't get over what's in your head, especially child abuse. Child abuse fucks you up, and alcohol screws you up, and whatever's going on.
Well, and chances are the child abuse led to the alcohol.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think that Cooney just couldn't get himself. He didn't really know how the cards were going to play out, and as it turned out, yes, if he could have stayed, kept his head together, had some fights, and defeated Michael Spinks, because he fought that 1 round knockout while Michael Spinks was fighting a lot, and if he had better, more bouts, and such like that, beat Michael Spinks. Oh yeah, Mike Tyson on a run, undefeated Mike Tyson, the invincible.
Yeah, because you remember how big Tyson against
Oh.
Spinks once and for all was when they did it. If you insert Cooney in there as beating Spinks, that fight even doubles what it was.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the nice thing is, I don't think they're always going to be a racial component, but I think that actually wouldn't be so much. I think you'd have a great Mike Tyson against the once great Gerry Cooney, if it is, in a slugger battle, and I just think it would have been great for the fans and such like that. But Michael Spinks gave Mike Tyson credibility by such a devastating 91-second knockout. But it's too bad Cooney wasn't. It is what it is.
Yeah, I still think Spinks
drives you to be great and drives you to the ground.
I think Spinks was pretty much done after the Cooney fight, though. Unfortunately, I mean, just the fact that he comes into the fight with Tyson with 2 knee braces, if you know what I mean. I think his legs were gone, and I think he knew he couldn't get away. And I don't for one second think Michael Spinks was afraid. I think that by the time Michael Spinks got in a ring with Mike Tyson, he just didn't see a way to be able to win.
No, and he would try to fight sort of aggressive, which just isn't the way to go. But I guess, I love Michael Spinks so much. My girlfriend loves him, and I just wished he hadn't fought him. But, they weighed $6 million or whatever they weighed at you. Who turns down, $10 million, $6 million, $10 million?
Oh, hell, back then it was $20 or $18 million, I think he made.
Was it? Yeah, and who turns down that kind of money? So it's really easy for people that are sports fans to say, yeah, forget the $18 million, but that's $18 million. And maybe I let Mike Tyson kick the shit out of me for half of that.
Oh, yeah. Mike can beat me up for $100,000. I'd be good with that.
Oh, yeah, me too.
I figure he's 50. He wouldn't be able to hurt us as bad now.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, it's unfortunate for Michael Spinks' legacy. And because of stuff like that, people don't even remember him beating Larry Holmes the first time for the heavyweight championship, or being a great lightweight. They're not remembering the Olympic gold medal. They're not really remembering the great fighting.
I mean, come on. He starts Marvin Johnson in 4 rounds. And that's the fight that stands out to me because nobody did that to Marvin Johnson. Marvin Johnson was a great light heavyweight.
Yeah, Dwight Muhammad and a lot of these guys. Even he fought, he's just tremendous. One of the greats of all time. But again, remember for one fight because everyone just Mike Tyson, the momentum and the build up and the hype, and that's what turned it into craziness about the Mike Tyson. Nobody will face him. Everybody's afraid of him except maybe Evander Holyfield. So I don't know if Cooney would have been afraid.
Maybe. Evander Holyfield was not afraid. And then you get George Foreman and Gerry Cooney in 1990. They called this the Geezers at Caesars, the preacher versus the puncher. And to tell you the kind of poll Foreman and Cooney was, it was black against white, but nobody cared about that. They just wanted to see what happened when these guys hit each other. There was 13,000 at the convention center. There was a huge closed-circuit pay-per-view crowd. And this is the fight that really got people to take Foreman seriously. It was Cooney's first fight in 2.5 years. And I remember Gil Clancy trained Cooney for this fight. And I remember seeing an interview with him where he said he always wanted to trade Gerry Cooney because he thought he could have made Gerry Cooney the heavyweight champion of the world. Cooney told me he probably trained harder for this fight than he did for any fight. And this, for 4 or 5 minutes, had more action than all the heavyweight fights we see in a complete year here anymore. And I know I got to interview George Foreman, too, and I hate to brag, but I am, Chris. But he still claims, Foreman does, that Cooney hit him harder than anyone he's ever been in a ring with. Cooney hit him at the end of the first round with a left hook and then hit him at the start of the second round. And Foreman said, I knew I had to get him out of there because I didn't want to get hit with that hook no more.
Well, right. And, I guess you're right. It's kind of funny to say. And Hagler Hearns has a reputation in such a great fight in 3 rounds. This was 2 rounds. The hell of a 2-round fight. A 2-round bout.
Cooney was smacking him at the end of that first round and at the start of the second.
Yeah, and it's such a great fight in retrospect because Cooney looks like the end of the trail. Foreman was still considered a little bit, a joke, though Foreman never went down in that second run, 10 years of retirement until he landed the heavyweight championship at age 45. Nobody knocked him down. I don't know.
Hey, George could probably beat half the guys in the top 10 right now, Chris.
Oh, yeah.
And he's 75.
And the thing is, Cooney is a competitor. These guys they have to be competitors to be who they are and what they are. But Foreman's at one of those hyper levels of greatness, and his competitiveness is you can see it in his eyes sometimes. He's not the fat guy who eats cheeseburgers to train. This is a guy who's got pride and is there. And Cooney was a good opponent for him, high profile enough to keep thinking Foreman, come on, this thing isn't serious, but it's serious enough to give him another high-profile fight. And, of course, Foreman parlayed that into another heavyweight championship.
Yeah, and the great thing about all this is we talked about Holmes and Cooney, how in 1980, 81, 82, they looked like they hated each other, all this racist stuff going around them. And the thing that stuck out to me is I interviewed Larry Holmes and I brought up Gerry Cooney. And he spent 5 minutes talking about what a great guy and a great fighter Gerry Cooney was. Cooney's the same way with Holmes. And after all this animosity had boiled over in 1982, the fact is now with Cooney's organization FIST, which helps former boxers get jobs, medical insurance, all that, Holmes and Cooney now are best friends.
Well, I know they think highly of each other. So it's kind of what the fans hope for, but you don't always get your way with. They hate each other when they're fighting, and then afterwards are buddies. But I think also maybe both of them learned more about the other one as human beings, a little bit more about the family lives, and you start to get touched by somebody else's story, and they have this great moment together. And so it is kind of nice that both of them say kind things about the other. My girlfriend want to say Gerry Cooney says nice things about everybody. Gerry Cooney's a humble person.
Yeah, but how about this? You can tell your girlfriend this. Guys like that, though, if he doesn't say anything about Larry Holmes, that means he doesn't like him. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I mean, these two guys, just from talking to both of them on air and off air, genuinely are fond of each other. And I think that happens. And that's the great thing about boxing. Because you kind of see into each other's souls when you're standing in the middle of a ring with the entire world watching you and you're hurting each other and you realize this guy's not going anywhere. I mean, it's hard not to have respect for a man that will stand and give it and take it like that.
Right, and I will give Cooney also a hell of a lot of credit for this. To get knocked down in the second round, this thing could have almost looked like, wow, is this thing going to be one-sided?
Yeah, Lennox Lewis, Michael Grant's what comes to mind to me there.
Yeah, it's nice to see, though. Yeah, it turned into a battle. They're both, very intense against the other one. And it is great that when all said and done, the fight itself, remember, we certainly still remember it as really high profile. And, yeah, I guess it's nice if in the end, the two guys can be good sports and say it is what it is, and the other guy's a hell of a guy, and somebody had to win, and the better boxer won.
Well, hell, when you were a kid, didn't you ever get in a fist fight with one of your friends? You were even better friends after that.
Not really. I got fist fights with people I hated better than they hated mine.
So you didn't have any respect for him after that. All right, Chris. Once again, Chris, it was great to bring this show back. I can't wait to talk about Michael Spinks next Friday.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you. It's fun to do. Michael Spinks is a great guy.
Hey, the other thing is this. We talked about an Irish heavyweight today in Gerry Cooney. You wrote an article a couple weeks ago that people can find on thegruelingtruth.com about another heavyweight, Peter Mayer. You want to talk a little bit about that article?
Sure. I really wanted to sort of research the Ireland's only gloved heavyweight champion, Peter Mayer. He followed John O'Sullivan and James Corbett, and just want to sort of show the progression of his reputation sort of takes a dive a little bit compared to them, but he was heavyweight champion 1895, 1896, defeated Joe Kowinski, power puncher at a time where defense was really emphasized, and it was a lot of fun writing about Mayer and just the grit it takes and the luck it takes to become a heavyweight champion. That some of them it works out and it doesn't. And then Mayer there's sort of a problem that the guy that defeated him for the heavyweight champion was Bob Fitzsimmons, and then Fitzsimmons and fought Tom Sharkey in a battle that was fraud was committed by Sharkey and his people. So it wasn't sure what to do. And so then James Corbett, who had retired, said, "Well, you could just say I'm still heavyweight champion." So anyway, Peter Mayer, some people don't think he was heavyweight champion, but he was. Corbett retired. He handed the mantle to Peter Mayer, and so Peter Mayer sort of slipped under the cracks of Jeffries and Fitzsimmons and Johnson and the others. But he's Ireland's only glove champion. And then my girlfriend's Irish, and I said, you know what? I'm going to write a hell of an Irish story, but not stupid Irish. Not like John Ford was, and I'm not thinking on John Ford's movie, but where an American goes so Irish, it's cuckoo Irish. I want it to be about Irish values, which is just hard work ethic. And the guy just came from Ireland, became heavyweight champion, and nobody else came from Ireland, became heavyweight champion. So I want to tell a story.
All right, very good. Remember, everybody, you can check that out on thegruelingtruth.com. All right, Chris, we're going to wrap it up. We will be back next Friday, same time, 2 o'clock Eastern on thegruelingtruth.com to talk a little Michael Spinks on our old-time boxing series. The really sad thing is, Chris, we're now doing old-time boxing shows about guys we grew up watching.
Well, and as you said, sometimes we wonder what the heavyweight ranks if the old-time fighters even now could knock out the guys today. No, I'm just kidding around.
Gerry Cooney would have destroyed Deontay Wilder. He'd have hit him with one left hook to the body, and Deontay Wilder would have puked on himself.
So it's it's fun to talk about some of these guys and try our best to be honest and tell the truth about them and hope they deserve to be remembered.
All right, very good. I want to remind everybody you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, Deezer, Podcast Addict, over 300 different outlets you can find The Grueling Truth. So make sure you check us out wherever your favorite podcasting platform is. So for Christopher Shelton, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.